Welcome everyone to the inaugural edition of Leviathan's Lair. Number one. Topics on this show will include seasonal talk. We have some interesting news on the seasons in Diablo. Game directors and all the different things that are going on there lately. And BlizzCon 2016, kind of the impact of both of those things on BlizzCon. A lot of speculation will be in this show. As you guys know, right now we really don't know much of anything, so we're really just trying to piece together based on the little hints and clues that we get from the different topics and blog posts and announcements and blue posts to see if we can figure the future, really, of Diablo and Blizzard's involvement with it. So as you know, this is a brand new thing that I'm doing. I was explaining right before we went live with this show. It's basically going to be kind of a no-nonsense, informal talk about some of the things that are like hot button topics or just conversations that I feel like we should be having. And just having some fun, honestly. Like, there'll be a game in the background. The game won't be super pertinent to the discussion, so you can just use this as like a podcast in quotes, if you will. Like, you don't have to actually watch the video. You can just listen to my lovely voice and the music. The games will potentially rotate or change. Like, I'll mostly play Diablo 3 because that is my main game, but maybe I'll play some Hearthstone. But the idea here is we're going to take some topics, chop them up, and you guys will also be able to contribute to that discussion here in real time. If you're watching on the stream, it's twitch.tv/Leviathan111. I'm thinking it'll happen every Saturday in the afternoon Eastern time, so around like 4 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern. If you follow on Twitter, I'll always announce before I go live, and my Twitter is LeviathanD3. But yeah, I want you guys to have involvement. The chat is there on screen so that we can kind of see what people are talking about in real time, and I will do my best to always be picking up what you guys are saying in the chat and reacting to it, kind of spitballing from your ideas with my own ideas. And lastly, if you want to contribute ahead of time, so let's say you have a topic that you think would be cool to cover, you can send me an email at leviathan@blizzpro.com, and I'll take into consideration kind of any thoughts you have. If you can't be on the show, or if you can't like watch the show when it's going to happen that Saturday, but maybe you have something interesting you want to input, we can kind of get like an email segment going. So definitely feel free to get in touch that way. You can help direct the future of this thing that we're doing. But yeah, so we'll start with some riffs. Pretty much be able to do these like eyes closed, so I'll be able to really talk a lot while still providing some gameplay on screen in case you get bored of listening to things. So let's see, seasons. Well, we just found out yesterday, and that would be September 30th, that Season 7 is going to end on October 14th. And we also found out that Season 8 will start immediately 1 week after, on October 21st. Whoa, look at all these goblins. And this build is the worst at killing goblins. Just so you know, so I'll probably not kill all these, by the way. In any case, so the controversy here is seasons, as far as we knew from BlizzCon 2015, were going to be basically set up for a set time. Like, they wanted to make sure that at some point they could turn off the, the maybe developer involvement or whatever you might want to call it. Be able to basically say, all right, we know that seasons for now and forever will be 3 months long. And that was the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? That was the trial that they were going to go out the gate with, 3 months. And for a while, when seasons were fresh and brand new, a lot of people were like, yes, we want seasons to be 3 months. It's too long at 5 months. It's way too short at, a month and a half or whatever that Season 2 length was. That was crazy. So we thought 3 months would be like a good medium. And it seemed like that was going to be the case. The last few seasons have been 3 months, and I didn't see really any complaints about that. But now this one's ending about 2 weeks earlier than usual. And then we're going to get the next season 1 week after. And normally there's like a 2-week break in between seasons. So there's a little bit of concern there because it seems like, and obviously there's no PTR live right now for those of you that follow Diablo 3. You know that there's no PTR, there's no sign of a new patch at all. So it's seeming pretty fair to say that Season 8 is going to run on Season 7's patch. Basically 2.4.2, what we're on right now. I'm not sure, honestly, how popular that's going to be. I honestly feel that we will see the least amount of participation that we have ever seen for a season come Season 8. Because if there's nothing that's dynamically changing, I think Diablo is the kind of game where people have, like, gotten to the point where it's like, once I've seen it, I've seen it. Once I've done it, I've done it. So you have to capture people's attention by switching things up on them. Even if it's only a few builds that change, a set that changes here and there. I think that goes a long way rather than just saying like, all right, we're going to roll out the same exact thing, have fun. And I know that there are some people who maintain that, well, you know, it was going to get to a point where each season that rolled out wouldn't have a brand new patch attached to it. It wouldn't have like major developments or anything. And that does make sense, but I don't think anyone really thought that it was going to come this soon. Like, we're basically only 2 years into seasons. 2 years? Yeah, I guess we could say 2 years at this point. 2 years into seasons, and I don't know, to be kind of like, I don't want to say mailing it in, but to get to a point where they're stagnating, you know, you could say that Season 7 was dynamic in that the group meta changed up a lot, but there were some things that were kind of pretty similar to Season 6. And then Season 8 seems like it's going to be very, very similar. I don't know. It's hitting me in a weird way. I feel like basically the kind of player that I am, the game is removing many of the things you can do for goals, things you can set for goals. Because if builds aren't going to change, then there's no goals in terms of like find the best build. If you already know kind of what your season's going to look like, then there's no like goal of, well, we need to plan for this and that, and here's how we're going to get to Guardian this time around and stuff. Like, you kind of already know what to do because you did it presumably in the last season. So I'm curious to see kind of how this gets received. It's still fresh news, but I did see a lot of people in the community just being like, well, I'm not quite sure how to feel about this, but maybe I don't feel good about it. It does make you think, though. One of the main things, and again, like another topic in the show today, is BlizzCon 2016, right? And if you look at the initial timetable for when Season 7 technically should have ended, in quotes, you can look at basically the end of October, early November as when Season 7 probably would have been finished. And it would have coincided, actually, right with the week before BlizzCon would go live, or BlizzCon would be starting, that Season 7 would be ending. Now, some people speculate that because Season 7 is now ending early, and Season 8 will start before BlizzCon starts, then they can use BlizzCon to kind of say, all right, here's our next big patch, here's 2.5, and it's going to have all this stuff, and you'll be able to PTR it during Season 8. So maybe Season 8 gets a little more, you know, interesting, quote-unquote, because you'll be able to test other stuff out. Like, even though it'll be the same, and maybe you start off in that first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it feels really good because you get the fresh start, but then they launch the PTR, and you just spend most of Season 8 PTRing a major patch. I think that's really the only reason that I could come up with for Season 7 changing like its schedule of when it should have ended. Let's see what you guys are saying in chat. So Zorak says, I think there will be something with D2, but what? So I guess that's in reference to BlizzCon. Yeah, we can skip around a little bit. So I guess for BlizzCon 2016, I'm thinking obviously there will be a lot of 20th anniversary type stuff. We're going to be looking back a lot at kind of the franchise's history and what we've seen, how it's evolved through the different games, through the different years. It does seem likely that there will be something to do with Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, whether that's just an update to getting it to work within the Battle.net launcher or Blizzard launcher, whatever it's going to be renamed to now that Battle.net's being retired. That still waits to be seen. We don't really know. A lot of people, of course, are hoping for the maximum awesome, which would be a Diablo 2 HD remake. Some people even want to go as far as to say like they will completely change features and things in Diablo 2. I think that's a rather ambitious idea or goal, but it could be the maximum effect if they really have like a ton of people in the background working on that conversion. But to me, I think it's more likely that they'll make the games easier to play and fit into their suite of offerings based on the launcher, basically. Let's see. You think they're creating a low point in the action to make the reveal seem larger? That's an interesting theory as well, too. So you kind of like lull people into a sense of, oh, there's nothing going on here. And then that puts a lot more eyes on BlizzCon. I mean, that just means that they would have to deliver even more so at BlizzCon, because if you create a down period or a low point and you don't deliver, then that really rubs the community the wrong way. So you have to hit it. You would have to have something like pretty massive to hit the community with to justify kind of depressing interest on purpose. So I don't know about that one. That's an interesting theory. I like it though. Yeah, I think a lot of people are putting some stake in BlizzCon in general though, hoping that it's going to be better than previous BlizzCons in terms of Diablo related announcements. The thing now, I think, with this seasonal sort of shift, making season 7 shorter and having season 8 launch rather quickly thereafter, I think it opens up for BlizzCon a panel that should at least talk about the future of D3, because if you had, I mean, I guess it technically wasn't it wasn't a limited option if season 7 had just ended before. Like, the timing technically doesn't matter, but I guess it does at least set up for the promotion of a PTR or some big patch coming if a brand new season has just started and a season has just ended. Maybe it's a little cleaner, but yeah, I think maybe now that sets them up for, like, here's a nostalgia panel. We'll do a lot of 20th anniversary type stuff. We'll talk about Diablo 1, Diablo 2, and then here's a Diablo 3 panel, and we'll talk about kind of the next big patch or the next big thing, some future of the game, and then I guess we go from there, maybe. Tied into this, of course, is people paying attention to the career page for Blizzard and noticing that the game director position has undergone a lot of interesting iterations in the last few weeks. And I think we should back up a little bit to at least note that there's this unannounced project. We know that there was an unannounced project. There were positions for it that were being hired. And over time, we've seen the positions removed from the careers page. A lot of people, I want to put this out there too, because I don't think people are considering it, but a lot of people are basically presuming that once a position is removed from the careers page, then it has been filled. I think that makes sense, and I think like it stands to reason, like if they're still looking, then they would keep it up, and if they're no longer looking, then it would take it down. But no longer looking doesn't necessarily mean that it's been filled. It could also mean like a change of plans, or it could mean a number of things. So it doesn't always have to mean that the position's been filled. I think that's just important in case you see that position come back up and you're like, wait, I thought this position was filled already. To note, a lot of those positions were for what looked like early development, a lot of concepting, a lot of art, a lot of stuff that basically notes the beginning of a game, the beginning of a brand new something. So it seemed likely that we could link that to a Diablo 4 or basically the next thing that's not Diablo 3 being worked on behind the scenes. I still believe in that. I still think that's reasonable. But I think something that was kind of interesting was the switch of the game director position just a few days ago from being labeled as a game director for an unannounced project to just a game director in general. And a lot of people thought, well, maybe this means it's going back to just game director for Diablo 3 or game director just for whatever Team 3 is currently working on. I don't know. There was a lot of speculation, but no real solid answers that I could tell. Then, I think it was just a day ago, the position was just removed from the website altogether. So that, to me, that is more curious than even the unannounced part being removed, because why would you change it just to remove it a day later, basically? And I don't know, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Maybe you guys have some theories or ideas, but I just wonder if it means that they're rethinking what they're trying to do right now. If Diablo 4 or whatever the next thing is like really far away, maybe they think they can wait before they hire a game director. Maybe they're suspending the search until, 2017. I don't know. I don't know necessarily why that would mean you'd have to take it down, though. But, I mean, maybe also they could take it down because BlizzCon's coming up, and that's when a lot of eyes are really, really on Blizzard, so a lot of people will be looking for clues anywhere and everywhere. To me, I think the thing that I would like to believe is that it denotes some sort of shift. I don't know if that's good or bad, and I don't know if that means like maybe D3 will get a little bit more attention, because it also kind of flies in the face of some of the other things we've seen, which I think is a good time to bring in the Developer Chronicle blog that Wyatt just wrote a few days ago. That's mostly about eras and talking about the fact that, eras were never meant to kind of line up with seasons. They were always supposed to be just a capturing of kind of what's going on with the game at a certain time. And then eventually, whenever like a massive change would happen, then the era would roll over. So if, there was going to be a major nerf to certain classes or something, it would make sense to roll the era, because maybe now Wizards can never get back to Greater Rift 110 solo, so that board would become stale, so you have to kind of reset it. If you're giving a bunch of people a bunch of power, then all the old results are instantly going to get beaten, because now everyone has power creep, so it would make sense again to roll the eras. With the idea that the eras won't be rolled for like a year at the maximum length, which is something that he kind of, I wouldn't even say hinted at, but something like he basically said, to me that, I don't know, I took that to mean like things are going to slow down. The future of Diablo 3 is not going to be one that's rife with like a ton of patches. In 2017, you might see like, I don't know, 2 patches or something. Because if there's no need to roll an era for over a year, that means no major change will come to the game for over a year. And I think the low end he might have offered up was like a 6-month potential for an era. So that would, again, kind of line up with like 2 major patches per year. That's, I don't know, to me that was more telling than anything else, because that's saying basically your time in this game will look very similar for long stretches of time. And the only kind of reset to it will be when seasons flip over, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 per year, basically. Assuming that they do go back to this 3-month kind of maximum. So I don't know. There's a lot of things to consider. I think the one thing that kind of just bugs me in general is that we don't have answers. Like, there's nothing concrete, so it just always makes you feel kind of on tenterhooks about where, like, what direction the game is going, what direction, what we can hope to see or kind of, put your money on, bank on in the future. That's why I'm really hoping that BlizzCon 2016, even if it doesn't announce like the major title that's coming for Diablo, the franchise, if it doesn't give us like some super thing to get hyped about, as long as it gives us some idea on the direction of Diablo 3 in particular, because we know this game isn't going away. It's released, it's out, and the only thing that can happen to it is a change for the better or a change for the worse. I think it's important to get some sort of direction on what's happening with Diablo 3 in particular, because that kind of like absolutely affects us right now. Like, after you leave BlizzCon, you're still going to have D3, so knowing what's going to happen to it matters quite a bit. Let's see, Dread says, also could be a technical decision to just do it early so they don't have to worry about it. So up in the air with Diablo this year. So that's referring back to rolling the season early. Yeah, but I mean, what's the difference, right? Like, I think they're professionals at this point on rolling seasons, so it shouldn't be too hard just because they're coming off of BlizzCon. Maybe like some people will take vacation, but I don't think they need like all hands on deck to really roll over a season anymore. I'm pretty sure they know what to expect at this point. Hopefully the reason that they aren't doing a PTR this time is that they're very busy getting something bigger finished. I think that's kind of a reasonable thing that people are thinking. It could mean that basically like there may have been a 2.4.3 or like a, you know, another mini version, a smaller patch that we could have seen if they did a PTR and then rolled into season 8. But I guess skipping it basically gives you more time to work on something else, right? So we kind of been surmising, maybe that means it's likely we'll see a 2.5 and that'll be part of what happens at BlizzCon. That'll be part of kind of one of their more major things that they talk about. Dread says it also seems like either a strange double back from scrapping a supposed D3 expansion 2 to move to DU something, back to doing things with D3 in general. I mean, yeah, it's the going theory has always been that the last few patches that we've seen, the major ones, have all just been content from kind of Diablo 3 Part 2, right? After Reaper of Souls, whatever the next expansion would have been, we figured, oh, we are just getting all of that content for free. Kanai's Cube, definitely an expansion type of feature. Looks like they're just giving that to us for free now. Different goblins. Okay, those could have been rolled into an expansion. That seems like something that maybe they would have saved. All right. Oh, all these cosmetic items. They're just going to throw them on the ground, like from Greater Rift monsters, and we'll just get them? Okay, that seems like something that could have been tied to seasonal rewards or future content, items that they could have made with those particular skins, or, you know, whatever the term might be, particular graphics for those items. But yeah, it just seemed like a lot of what was being given to us was stuff that could have been potential content elsewhere. So the whole idea of, well, yeah, we're not going to get expansion 2 now because they've given all that stuff away, made a lot of sense. But if the future of Diablo 3 is that now things are going to slow down because they're working on something for Diablo 3, then maybe, I mean, I don't know, there were also, if you have been on Reddit in the past like half year, when all the speculation started for, I think we're going to get something that's more Diablo 4 oriented than Diablo expansion, a lot of people were saying, no, I think Diablo 3 is finally at the best spot that it could be. Why not just expand on that? Even though the, you know, base system for it is maybe not the most ideal, they've done a lot with that like less than stellar system. So like, why not continue to build on it and just, you know, make D3 an even better experience? And plus you can roll that out way faster than potentially a brand new game, which might take, you know, 3-4 years from now before we ever see it. So maybe that's, you know, again, they've been really good about listening to the community and trying to kind of capture the zeitgeist of what people want. So maybe that's honestly what we're seeing. Maybe they decided, hey, we should actually shift more resources to doing something with Diablo 3. We can work on this game like really, really long term now, like, you know, give it a 6-year window instead of we were hoping for 3 years, and just pump something else out for Diablo 3. I still feel like it's unlikely, just because, I don't know, if you do look at kind of the way that Diablo 3 was set up, it just seems like a design space that, you know, for better or worse, they've done a lot with, but just everything being tied to main stat and stuff, it doesn't make for the most, like, robust changes, I guess. Like no matter what kind of changes that you would make, at the end of the day, you still are ruled a lot with your power still comes a lot from primary stat and paragons, and I mean, like, they could really rework the entire paragon system in an expansion. That's the kind of like retooling that I think would make sense for an expansion. You could potentially de-emphasize primary stat. I'm not sure how you would move away from that in an expansion, but I guess you potentially could maybe make enough like affixes or make gear matter so much more than primary stat. But I think no matter what, you're kind of married to it at this point. So how do you move away from it? So just because it seems like such a compromised design space, I just would imagine they'd be more excited to move on to something now, like having all the ARPG lessons that they have, move on to something where they can learn from kind of the mistakes that they push themselves into and make something like even more robust than would currently be possible. Yeah, I think just reading chat, the Legion expansion, for me, looking at it from the outside in, because I have not, played pretty much a single day of WoW since 2012, this seems to be one of the better received expansions. I see a lot of people still actively playing, still really into it, whereas I felt like even by this time, when Warlords came out, a lot of people were like, oh man, it's really just garrisons and that's it. I'm already bored of this. And then people had issues with Mists of Pandaria as well too, but for whatever reason, it seems like the Legion really hit home with what people were wanting. So I think it's kind of crazy to think that Legion would ever be the last expansion on WoW. In fact, if you look at, just because we're always on the careers page and our eyes are usually on Diablo, if you actually look at the World of Warcraft side of things on the careers page, they're already looking for an art director. They have a bunch of positions that all have like exclamation points next to them, which means they're like super vital to Blizzard right now. So I would actually guess that they're probably ready to work on the next expansion for World of Warcraft. I don't think they'll ever... I think, honestly, the only time we'll see them stop making expansions is if they come up with a new MMORPG, which seems very unlikely, especially given, that Titan could have been that. Or they get to the point where subs are so low, interest in the game is so low, that releasing a new game would not be enough, or a new expansion would not be enough of a money grab, basically, to be worth it. I just feel like, wow, they can print so much money. It doesn't make sense for them to ever really stop working on it. But yeah, Dread, reading what you're saying with the Era blog, basically officially moving the game to maintenance mode, I think that was kind of the main takeaway, the major takeaway from that. I'm totally in agreement that the writing was kind of on the wall at the end of that one. It was basically saying, like, don't expect change. Don't expect major change for months at a time for Diablo 3. So we might still, I think maybe the positive side of it is that we probably might still see patches, but they're going to be very infrequent. So it means like there are still people manning the house on Diablo 3, but clearly whatever the announced project is, they're working on that. And now, I guess the thing that we're needing to figure out, or wanting to figure out, is how much of the needle is swinging towards that unannounced project being something completely unrelated to D3 versus actually for D3. I still, like, I don't think we can ever, just because I feel like it's going to be a D4 or a brand new game, it doesn't necessarily mean like there's not a chance for it to also be D3, version 2 or whatever. It's almost like on a spectrum, right? Like, I would say the chance right now, to me, feels like a 70% chance for a D4/new game, and like a 30% chance for an expansion, which is like way higher than I would have rated it maybe even 2 weeks ago. But I think it's kind of important to always still consider the fact that Diablo 3 changes, like big changes, game type of expansion changes, may not be done. Even if it seems unlikely, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not possible. Otherwise, though, the game director thing, I think, is still very curious, because it makes me wonder if they feel the need to have a game director solely for just the Diablo 3 team, or sorry, for just the Diablo team, or if they feel the need to have a game director for both Diablo 3 and whatever its changes might be, or or sorry, yeah, for Diablo 3 and whatever its changes might be, and then also for the unannounced project, to have two of them kind of in-house working on separate things. I guess you could say that that was the case when you had Jay Wilson working on the PC version and Josh Mascara working on the console version. Even though it was the same game, it was, you know, two very different platforms. And in a way, you could actually say the console version was kind of its own different thing for quite some time. Like, the PC ended up borrowing so much of the stuff that made the console such a rich experience. You could say they were really working on two different projects, basically, so two different game directors. So with that in mind, that's kind of why when the position moved from unannounced project game director to just regular game director, I was almost thinking, maybe they are just actually, they hired the unannounced project game director and they could actually just be looking for a regular game director now for, you know, the continuation of Diablo 3. And maybe, here's another thought too, right? Maybe if they went down that road, maybe Wyatt got that position, right? And they just needed to list it for like a day or 2 days or whatever to say like, hey, this was open, but we decided to go with an internal candidate. And now Wyatt's going to be that game director. And then, by the way, hey, announcement, we also hired this other game director. And he's working on something super secret. Or she, or, you know, he or she is working on something super secret. So there's also considerations there as well. The flip side to that is that game directors don't come cheap, right? Like, those are the guys who are kind of with a ton of influence on what products Blizzard will be putting out. So I'd imagine they kind of command top dollar in terms of needing to have a salary that keeps them on deck for Blizzard. So if you're going to have two game directors, then you're paying a decent amount for it. So it would kind of make sense if you think you're one game director who's working on the unannounced project. If nothing major is changing with D3, then maybe that game director can just mind the store, if you will, and be there to advise on, you know, some minuscule changes or some number tweaking or things like that on Diablo 3. And that way, you know, you have one game director wearing two hats, but only paying for one salary. Just as like a thinking of it from kind of the business side, that might be something to consider. And yeah, Miss Cheetah, I see your comment basically reinforcing what I was saying. Like, they would not be hiring, moving back to World of Warcraft, they would not be hiring a ton of people for that game if Legion was going to be the last expansion for it. Like, there's no way. It wouldn't even make sense at all. So I think we're safe to honestly even think we're safe to think that there might be a preview of the next Warcraft expansion at BlizzCon. Like, if they're really serious about rolling out expansions for World of Warcraft within a year and a half's time, like, you would basically need to announce it come this December or November if you want to roll it out for, you know, somewhere in 2017. And I guess if you were giving yourself a year and a half window, then you have until like maybe early 2018 or like holiday season, basically 2017. Zorak says your ultimate dream is D2 and a D3 engine. I think a lot of people would like that. I think one of the main things that people were always pointing to that was really great about D3, like, you know, amidst its problems early on, there was no one who had issues with the gameplay. Like, the physical combat, just the act of killing monsters was always really satisfying, always really good in this game. So I don't think anyone would argue that this engine really gets it. Some people have said, though, that this engine feels kind of old. Like, in the year 2016, there are things about it that potentially feel aged. Now it being 4 years old. And I guess potentially older than that because it was being developed, you know, years before it was released. So maybe go back to 2009. Call it 7 years old, 2010. That would be something that, again, was pointed at with the whole, and this is kind of getting beyond my understanding, but as far as development goes, some of the requirements for the positions that were on the unannounced project were for some of the newer tech that is being used in Overwatch, for instance, in order to develop that game. So people are thinking that those positions especially pointed towards a newer game and not an expansion for Diablo 3, because it seemed like it was talking about the game in terms of a brand new engine. So whatever they would be making wouldn't be using what we're seeing right now with D3. So it seemed to make sense that, yeah, this is actually just like D4 or whatever the next thing might be. And Dread says, all the systems seem pretty much maxed out, and anything more on one or another may have real negative effects on the others. I think that's another thing that's definitely huge to consider, is that if you make any big changes, it's going to affect a lot of the other changes that have been made along the way. In the same way that Paragon initially was a really good thing for extending the life of a character, the life of someone playing on the same person that they've built up over time, it became exacerbated as they added in a system where now you get a ton of experience in Greater Rifts. As they added in a system, now you get a ton of main stat for your ancient pieces. And then they added in ancient pieces, which was giving you more main stat in general too. So it was just all these things kind of building on this one system that came in and was really good, and now it's the problem child. So I do agree that if you try and make some changes to this game, it will be a really complicated soup. But I mean, we also have to give kind of the developers the credit that, you know, this is what they do for a living, this is what they get paid to do. So they should be able to figure out a way, if they want to go with an expansion number 2 for Diablo 3, that they would know how to do it, right? They would be able to introduce some stuff that feels really cool to do and to play with, that wouldn't necessarily compromise what we have right now, or it wouldn't make the game just like this ridiculous, unplayable, doesn't feel good version. One would hope anyways, right? Let's see. Miss G says, revised skill trees to actually make it an RPG would be welcome. I also think that they might use the new WoW PvP system to introduce PvP to D3 because it's not gear dependent. Yeah, that was something that Nineball has been looking at and talking about. Like, the WoW PvP system seems to be another thing that's really applauded with this latest expansion. Just all the changes that were made to it. And I think that one of the motivations to move forward with the next Diablo rather than expand on this Diablo is that this Diablo doesn't have PvP, and it would be really hard to introduce PvP to this one without basically making like preset characters or like really making gear not matter. And for the most part, the reasons they said they haven't done it is because they really don't want you to not play your character, and they don't want you to not like enjoy the gear that you've been farming up. So I don't know, it seems to me that the next game gains a bit more credibility of being a reality, because now, yeah, you can actually look at how has PvP evolved in ARPGs and other games that Blizzard puts out, that other studios put out, and how can we borrow from some of those things and try and make a robust PvP, which is something that always seems to still get brought up for Diablo. I don't think that if they make another Diablo game, they would want to exclude PvP. Just because it seems like something that people really love, and if they're really going to double down on listening to the community, then it's kind of in their interest. It behooves them to find a way to make it work. And it's something I hadn't really like considered, because I'm not a PvP person. I don't really, care for PvP. And for me, like, my biggest thought was always, well, we got Heroes of the Storm, and that was a thing that was coming up, and now it's fully released. And so maybe that's why PvP in Diablo 3 never saw the light of day, because they wanted Heroes of the Storm to really be like their, hey, you want a PvP? Fight each other in this game that we also make. But I don't know. I would say in the future, though, it would make sense to have just something to fight each other that feels good as a system. It would just offer another way to play the game, right? And I think that's mainly one of the major complaints, is that this game just, at the end of your initial gearing up, it really devolves into just one thing to do, and that's do Greater Rifts. Like, people don't even like doing bounties all that much. People kind of get, they do regular rifts just because it's a necessity, but really you make all your money in Greater Rifts, and there's really nothing else besides that. So if there was, hey, I can take a break from Greater Rifts and just, fight my friend to see which of us is really better geared or better skilled or whatever, That's at least another reason to log into the game. That's not, oh man, alright, I have to grind these Greater Rifts tonight. I have to work on my Paragon tonight. So just looking at it from the current available stuff, it would make sense. But then, of course, if you look at it where there's a limitless future, tons of features and things that could come in, it would, in my head, make some good sense just to round things out. Like, hey, here's your PvE stuff, and it's going to be really robust and a lot of things to do. And here's your PvP, and it's got a really cool system to it, and you can do that forever if that's your cup of tea. But just a little something for everyone. I think usually Blizzard is good about doing that with all their games. Like, it shouldn't be dependent on you wanting to play a completely different game to get the experience that you want to get out of the game that you just enjoy playing in general. So to say, like, go play Heroes is kind of like that doesn't really make sense, right? Let's see. Easy Target says there is an article somewhere stating that Blizzard is going to pull back on the whole yearly expansion after the Warlords mess. They're going to focus more on patches and less on expansions. Oh, I hadn't seen that, but that could also be a thing too. I 100% maintain that I'm not a WoW expert, so whenever I talk about WoW, it's mostly from just what I've heard from people. So if that is the case, then that's totally valid. WoW's engine still holds up. Yeah, it did get overhauls too, though, like Miss Cheetah's saying. Like, one of the things that they were rolling out for quite some time was, you know, all those updates to the different... oh, I didn't even get any legendaries. All those updates to all the playable classes and races and things, where you were like, here's the new human face and the new human body and stuff like that. Blizzard never really did yearly expansions with WoW. Yeah, it was the goal, but they never met it. It just seemed, though, that they were, with the kind of quicker turnaround on Legion, it seemed like they were trying to get back to more of that faster rollout. But I mean, you can always have a goal and not hit it, but at least if the goal's there and you get like somewhere within it, even if you're a little over it, then that's better than nothing. WoW's PvP is no longer gear dependent, so they are testing that model so the RNG for D3 would no longer be an issue. Yeah, I mean, it would, in order for PvP in Diablo in general, maybe, to exist in that way where it's not dependent on gear, it would actually be Blizzard backtracking on how they have said they feel about PvP for Diablo. Because the reason that, you know, when PvP was in the game and it was being previewed at BlizzCon and all these different places where people were getting to actively try it, it was with these like pre-made characters and in these arenas, and people said it was a good experience. But then one of the major reasons why Blizzard never rolled out with it was they wanted us to be playing our characters. They wanted the gear to matter. And of course, if that's the case, you are going to have these wild varying power levels, and you would have to find a way to balance things while still making gear relevant. Which, I mean, like, yeah, if it becomes too hard to do, then maybe you just don't make the gear relevant. Maybe people will be okay. And I guess maybe that's kind of like the test in WoW, right? Is if they find that PvP in WoW is really well received and really enjoyed, then maybe they can say, all right, you know what, we felt this one way about PvP, but it turns out people really don't mind not like being fully dependent on the gear that they've farmed up and, you know, wanting to use their own stuff. Like, maybe we can go forward with this idea now in Diablo, because we thought it was going to be a major sticking point, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I just wouldn't want to see... I guess if it's a different mode, then it's fine, but I wouldn't want to see a Diablo that does, like, gear doesn't matter at all. I think we do need gear to still make a difference, because at the end of the day, like, why am I logging in and playing this game right now, right? I'm trying to find stuff. And if you make gear not matter, then it doesn't really matter what I find or don't find in a session. So I think at the heart of a game like Diablo, where it's just all about the loot, you still really want gear to be something that's important, But it also shouldn't be the end-all be-all. I definitely feel that. But I guess it really depends on how if they can imagine PvP in Diablo in a way that we haven't seen yet. If they decide not to borrow like a model from a game that has already been out, such as Diablo 2 or World of Warcraft or anything like that. I mean, they could even do like a mixing of the systems, right? Like maybe gear still matters, but it doesn't matter as much. Like maybe you just depress people's stats when they get into this battle arena. I mean, there's a ton of things that they could potentially try to do to balance it out. Maybe it'll never be 100% balanced, but even if they get it to within where it doesn't feel super unfair, then maybe that'll be a passable version. I don't know, it's definitely something to consider. Maybe we'll have to have another topic specifically on PvP, because that could be interesting. I know there's always a lot of thoughts, especially because my inclinations are so non-PvP oriented that it's not something I honestly give a lot of attention or thought to. I usually just care more about the PvE stuff, and I do like competition, but I actually do like competition the way that it currently works in Diablo 3, which is just like PvE VP, basically, like competing against other players based on how you compete against the environment. But if anything, I like that idea that you just threw out there. Like they could just make separate PvP gear based on your progress in PvP. And so now, not only are you still legitimizing the loot chase for like anyone who just wants to do PvE, but you're even making people kind of curious about more gear, because now you have this other tier of stuff that you can chase if you want to be a PvPer. So now you're saying, hey, by the way, like you can get double your fun by getting even more gear and really going through this PvP system. Of course, you know the issue there? Where are you going to hold it all? Like, you would have to have stash space galore in the next version of Diablo if you're going to have separate gear and all this stuff, like separate specs. You'd have to have an easy change of specs, or maybe just like a completely separate, when you do PvP, like you already have a spec set up that you just instantly transform into based on your last play or whatever. But yeah, you would have to definitely curb some of the issues that are pain points for people in Diablo 3 right now, which is gear management, gear storage, and I guess gear management kind of covers both, like, you know, being able to store all your gear and also being able to quickly change from, you know, speed farm set to a GR set to a PvP set, whatever the new stuff might be. But yeah, I guess we're almost at the end of our inaugural session here, so I'll just loop back kind of on what we talked about so far. So basically, you know, shorter Season 7 than expected, raises some questions, potentially has an impact on what happens at BlizzCon. So, you know, we have almost a month basically to wait until BlizzCon kicks off, and then we'll obviously know more. We'll have some things answered. Hopefully we'll have less questions than when we went in. But, you know, knowing Blizzard, they love their secrets, so maybe we'll even leave BlizzCon with more questions than we had when we first got there. And then the whole game director thing still raises a lot of questions in terms of just what is the future. I think that's mainly what we want to get nailed down. At this point, it seems like we're still leaning towards the idea of a brand new thing, a brand new Diablo, but there is potentially some room for at least like major patches. We won't get patches as often, but maybe when we do, they'll be major for D3, so that could be something to look forward to. Like, instead of season to season being different, maybe we'll have like 2 or 3 seasons that look really similar to each other, and then, you know, the second half of the year, the seasons will be very different. So, you know, 7 and 8 look similar, but then 9 and 10 are very different, and then 11 and 12 are very different. It may just be a slower cycling of changes. So I guess for people who want to potentially spend time doing more things, which kind of helps you if you love Blizzard games overall, because there's so many offerings that they make now between Overwatch, Hearthstone, Heroes, World of Warcraft, and all of them having like really good releases lately. If you want to spend more time playing Hearthstone, you know, for the next few months, you could skip Season 8 and then just come back to Diablo when Season 9 rolls out, and that season's really different. So maybe, you know, not saying that they would do it for that reason alone, but maybe it kind of helps if you're a multi-game player. You know, maybe you feel a little bit better about it because, hey, it gives me more time to play other things. But I think one of the major things to think about, you know, Season 8, again, that's going to roll out on the 21st, so that's 1 week after Season 7 ends. One thing to think about there is what's the reason for seasons after this one in particular. If you've been really good about getting all your stash tabs in the last few seasons, then Season 8 actually represents the last season that you technically care about getting to Conqueror, because this will be the last tab that you can get. You'll be maxed out at your 10. I know that's the case for me. So at that point, once I have that tab, I have no reason to really care about getting through the different levels of, you know, Guardian and Conqueror and Slayer and all that, except for just being a completionist and, you know, if there's a cool portrait frame or a cool pet or something. So I mean, I don't know. I think obviously the stash tab will always be there as a reward for those who haven't gotten it yet. But for those who are maxed out, I think, again, now your reason for seasons is even more diminished than it previously was. So I don't know. That feeling when Lev kills his mob in game. I didn't even notice if I killed myself. At this point, it happens all the time. I kill me. But yeah, I guess that's where we're going to wrap things up for this session. So I hope you guys enjoyed. You know, the conversation bounced around a little bit. We talked about seasons, we talked about game directors and positions and stuff, and we even talked about some WoW, some PvP, and we talked about some BlizzCon, so that's always good. Again, you know, hoping to do these every Saturday around this time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Eastern. Follow on Twitter and you'll get updates on right before I'm going to go live, or, you know, a few minutes or so before I go live, so you can prep yourself. And that's Leviathan D3. If you're watching this on the YouTube VOD, feel free to stop by when we do go live just to be a part of the conversation in the chat. And that's twitch.tv/Leviathan111. If you want to contribute to potential suggestions for topics going forward, feel free to hit me up. You can also tweet at me for that. That's fine. You can also send an email. And to do that, that's leviathan@blizzpro.com. Again, thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoyed this. Definitely leave me some feedback. Let me know what you thought. What we could have done better, what we could have done worse. What we could have done worse. And yeah, I'll be seeing you all next time. Thanks for stopping by.